If you told us a few years ago that we'd be home educating all three of our children, I'd have probably smiled and thought you had the wrong family because we weren't those parents. We believe exactly what most parents believe, that school is where children learn, that teachers know best, qualifications come first, and if you choose a different path, you're taking a huge risk with your child's future. We worried about everything. Would they make friends? Would they fall behind? Would universities even accept them? Would employers take them seriously? And perhaps the biggest fear of all, what if we got it wrong? Looking back now, it's incredible how many of those fears came from things we'd simply never questioned. Because almost everything we thought we knew about education turned out not to be quite as simple as we'd been led to believe. Now, this video isn't telling everyone they should home educate. It isn't about convincing you to take your child out of school. And it definitely isn't about saying school is wrong. Every child is different. Every family is different. And what works brilliantly for one might not work at all for another. But if you're watching this because something isn't sitting right, maybe your child is struggling, maybe they're anxious, maybe they're autistic, maybe they're refusing school, or maybe you've just started wondering whether there's another way, then this is the video we wish someone had made for us, because these are the things we genuinely wish we'd known before we started home education. Like most people, we never planned to home educate. If you'd asked us 10 years ago what our children's education would look like, our answer would have been exactly the same as everyone else's. Go to school, work hard, pass exams, go to college or university, get a job. That was simply what life looked like. We never questioned it, because why would we? It's the path almost all of us grew up believing was the only option. Home education wasn't something we talked about. We didn't know anyone who did it. We assumed it meant sitting around the kitchen table trying to recreate school, except without teachers. It honestly sounded terrifying. But then life has a habit of asking questions you never expected to answer. For us, those questions started when school simply wasn't working for our children in the way we'd hoped. Not because teachers didn't care, many of them cared deeply. Not because schools were trying to fail anyone, but because one system cannot perfectly fit every child, especially children whose brains experience the world a bit differently. We started asking ourselves a question we'd never imagined asking. What if school isn't the only place a child can receive an education? That single question changed everything. But here's what surprised us the most. It wasn't what happened after we started home educating. It was how wrong our biggest assumptions turned out to be. This was probably our biggest fear. We genuinely thought we'd have to become teachers overnight. Lesson plans, timetables, worksheets, maths at 9, English at 10, science after lunch. We'd imagine trying to recreate school inside our own house. And honestly, that sounded impossible because we're parents, not teachers. But one of the biggest mindset shifts we ever had was realizing that home education isn't school at home. It doesn't have to be. Learning happens everywhere. Cooking is maths, shopping is budgeting, walking through a forest becomes biology, building Lego becomes engineering, a random question about volcanoes at breakfast can become 2 hours of science. Children don't suddenly stop learning because they aren't sitting at a desk. In fact, they're learning all the time. The question becomes, are we recognizing it? Or are we only counting learning when it looks like school? That completely changed how we saw education, because education is so much bigger than classrooms. And then we discovered something we thought would be the biggest problem of all. Actually, became one of our biggest surprises. Once we became part of the home education community, our children suddenly found themselves spending time with people of all ages, not just children born in the same 12-month period. They met toddlers, teenagers, adults, grandparents, business owners, artists, musicians, engineers, people with completely different experiences and interests. Friendships began to grow naturally, through shared interests rather than shared birthdays. And that was something we'd never really considered before. Now, does that mean every home educated child instantly has dozens of friends? Of course not. Like every child in school doesn't either. Every child is different. Some are naturally outgoing, some are quieter, some take longer to build relationships. But what we have discovered was that socialization isn't about being surrounded by people, it's about building meaningful relationships. And those relationships can happen almost anywhere. But there was something even more important than friendships, and we almost missed it completely. This, more than anything else, changed the way we think about education. When a child has been anxious, overwhelmed, or constantly trying to cope, learning isn't always the first priority. Sometimes they simply need to feel safe again. They need to know they aren't going to be judged. They need to know they aren't constantly failing. They need to know someone understands them, especially for autistic children or children with a PDA profile. We've learned that behaviour is often communication. A refusal isn't always defiance. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes it's exhaustion. Sometimes it's a child saying, I genuinely can't. When we first started, there were moments we worried we weren't doing enough. Should we be doing more maths, more English, more worksheets? But over time, we realised something incredibly important. You can't build learning on top of survival, because when a child's nervous system is constantly in fight, flight, or freeze, they're not choosing not to learn, they're simply trying to cope. Looking back, giving our children time to recover wasn't delaying education, it was making education possible. And I honestly wish someone had told us that much earlier, because it would have saved us months of guilt. Once we understood that, something unexpected happened. One of the hardest things to let go of was our definition of progress. We'd spent our entire lives measuring learning the same way: tests, grades, worksheets, reports, tick boxes. So when those things disappeared, it almost felt like nothing was happening, until we started noticing something a bit different. The questions became deeper, conversations became longer, confidence started growing, curiosity came back. Instead of asking, what page are we on? We started asking, what are they interested in today? And honestly, that changed everything. Because children are naturally curious. Watch a toddler for 5 minutes. They're constantly experimenting, constantly asking questions, constantly learning. That curiosity doesn't disappear. Sometimes it just gets buried underneath pressure, anxiety, or the feeling that getting the right answers matters more than asking good questions. Once that pressure began to lift, learning became enjoyable again. Not every day, not perfectly. We still had difficult days. We still questioned ourselves, but we stopped measuring success by whether learning looked like school and started measuring it by whether our children were growing in confidence, growing in independence, growing in curiosity, growing into themselves. And that's when we realized something that completely changed, not just our children, but us as parents too. Because home education didn't just change the way our children learned, it changed the way we thought about childhood itself. One of the biggest misconceptions we had was that there must be one correct way to home educate. We spent hours online looking for the perfect timetable, the perfect curriculum, the perfect daily routine. We thought that somewhere someone had already figured it all out. But the longer we've been home educating, the more we've realized there isn't a perfect way, because there isn't a perfect child. Some children love structure, others feel trapped by it. Some enjoy online lessons, others learn best outside. Some thrive with workbooks, others would rather build something, create something, or spend 3 hours researching a random topic that suddenly caught their imagination. And that's okay. One of the greatest strengths of home education isn't freedom from learning, it's freedom to learn differently, freedom to adapt, freedom to slow down, freedom to speed up, freedom to say, this isn't working anymore, and change it. That flexibility has probably been one of the greatest gifts we've been given as parents, because instead of asking, how do we make our children fit education? We've started asking, how can education fit our children? That single question changes everything. But perhaps the biggest surprise wasn't what changed for our children, it was what changed for us. If I'm honest, I thought home education was something we'd be doing for our children. I never expected it to change us, but it has massively. It's changed how we define success. It's changed how we look at childhood. It's changed how we measure progress. And it's changed what we value most. Before, I'd often find myself asking questions like, are they keeping up? Are they on track? Are they where they should be? Questions that, if we're honest, most parents ask. Now, our questions sound very different. Are they happy? Do they feel safe? Are they curious? Do they enjoy learning? Are they becoming more confident? Are they building good relationships? Are they becoming kind, resilient, independent? Because when we really thought about it, those were the things that mattered most to us. Not because GCSEs don't matter, they absolutely can. Not because qualifications aren't important. For many careers, they're essential. But qualifications are only part of one person's life. Character, confidence, curiosity, compassion, those matter too, and they're much harder to measure on a report card. I think one of the biggest lessons we've learned is that children aren't all meant to grow at the same speed, in the same direction, or at the same time. And perhaps education shouldn't expect them to. So, if we could sit down with ourselves on the day we first started home education, what would we say? I think we'd say, take a breath. You don't need to have all the answers today. You don't need to recreate school. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to compare your family to another family. Trust takes time. Confidence takes time. Finding your rhythm takes time. Some days will feel amazing. Others will make you question everything. That's normal. Home education isn't perfect. We're certainly not perfect. We've made mistakes. We've changed our minds. We've had days where nothing went to plan. But we've also watched our children discover interests we'd never have imagined. We've watched confidence return. We've watched curiosity grow. We've watched relationships become stronger. And looking back, that's worth more than we can put into words. If we could go back knowing everything we know today, would we make the same decision? Without hesitation, yes. Not because home education is the right choice for every family, it isn't. But because for our family, it became the right choice. And that's really the message we hope you take away from this video. You don't have to copy another family's journey. You don't have to fit someone else's idea of what education should look like. You simply need to find what allows your own child to flourish. If you've made it this far, thank you. Whether you're just beginning to think about home education, you're already on the journey, or you're simply curious, we're really glad you're here. We started Home Ed Hero because a few years ago, we were searching for honest answers ourselves. Not perfect answers, not political debates, just real experiences from families living this every day. If that's the kind of content you're looking for, we'd love for you to subscribe. And if you're comfortable sharing, tell us in the comments. Where are you on your journey? Are you just starting to ask questions? Are you already home educating? Or somewhere in between? We read every comment and would love to hear your story. We'll see you in the next one.